Anybody got a request you'd like today? Just one. Have you got one?
Watch for that on Bill's next album. You hear that? Eddie said, "Tony, I always knew you were really screwed up." Well, Tony and I'm going to suggest that we do a little Remington ride and sort of experiment around with it the way we do. What do you think, you and I? This is something that Tony and I kind of are into. The other night we were in the staircase between 3 and 4 in the morning in the hotel. I said, you know, this ought to be called staircase music. I don't know. It starts as bluegrass music, and it kind of goes through other phenomena, you might say, and we sort of come from a tradition amongst kind of weirdos, you might say, in the Northeast, people who like to just. In fact, I used to be in with a group of people who, in addition to playing bluegrass as faithfully as we could, at certain times, at other times, we'd like to sit down and see if we could play music with absolutely no rules at all, except be responsive to the other people you're around. If you feel like changing keys or rhythms or anything like that, that's okay. Just try to do it gracefully if you can, or something. So. Trade it back and forth a little bit and then sort of go into the staircase. Okay. So how does it start? here, but we just did our best. All right, I think this is a good time to, wow, we've got some good crowd lining up there. If you want to just spread yourselves around here more, you can get a little closer. Anyway, we'll take some questions now, and if you have one directed to any one person in particular, just say who it is and what's the question. If there aren't any questions, I'm sure we can just keep on handing it around, and since nobody jumped into the breach, I'd just like to ask Scott to play us something from the more progressive end of his repertoire, just to hear what you're up to lately. Can you handle that? Oh, I bet you could. All right.
This is a little thing in B I've just been messing around with.
What type of banjo does Scott have?
The pot is a 62 bow tie. It's an old 250. And it's got a Jimmy Cox 3-ply shell in it. That's really one of the only modifications. The rest of it's pretty much original.
About what year, roughly? Any idea?
Around 62.
Uh-huh. Okay. Any other question? Yes. What key did he play what in? I'm sorry.
What, the rap song? Oh, I think that was in D. I don't honestly remember. It was a long time ago. I think it was in the key of D, a tune that I wrote that's on my CD. I just want to bring up a quick point, though, about keys. And Scott did this, and Mike was experimenting with it, too. The idea of playing out of different keys without a capo, which you can accomplish by putting the banjo in different tunings or not. There's a lot you can do in just a straight G tuning, and it's one of the things I'm really into, is trying to stretch things a little bit that way, as much as, even though from what I did here today, you wouldn't necessarily think that I've listened to a lot of Earl Scruggs. I continue to listen to a lot of Earl Scruggs and continue to be blown away by his music, and I continue to learn from it all the time, and it's sort of a lifetime endeavor to try to get closer to what he's doing, as well as doing my own thing. But a really nice thing to get into is playing in different keys without a capo, and Scott was just playing out of B without a capo, which is not what you would necessarily consider to be a standard key. And if you just find the open strings, I guess you were using the open B string there a lot to accomplish what you're doing. Right. And do you have any comments about that? We're working out of different keys without a capo?
I try to do more of it all the time. I think it's good to get into that. It makes the banjo a little bit more of a different instrument than just playing it like a banjo. Play it more like a musical instrument. It's just a banjo.
A new role for the banjo in the 90s.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it's important. And one thing is to try to find out ways to get drive out of different keys. You can get a lot of drive out of the key of B, even though what Scott did was more relaxed sort of a feel. And E is one of my favorite keys, and the tune I played with the tape is out of E. But you can do things out of E like Foggy Mountain Breakdown. And that's just one sort of thing. There's a lot of limitless possibilities, and what I'd recommend to you as banjo players, if you're into, say, the melodic style, and you're working up a fiddle tune, try to play it in the key it was originally written in, rather than, if something's in the key of A on the fiddle, rather than learning it in G and capoing up 2 frets, try to do it in A without the capo. Things like June Apple, instead of going, you can do just as easily. I mean, this is a very, I'm just trying to throw this in here because I think it's real important for a direction to go into if you're looking for new avenues to explore.
How many people here are banjo players?
Don't be embarrassed.
It's all right here, anyway. How many people here are, say, banjo players who play in a group? All right, that's quite a few. That's good. Yeah, that's definitely good fertile ground Tony is referring to. Yes, sir. Yeah, in fact, I think Tony can do that very well. The question is, what about the banjo players who were really busy making music on the 5-string around 1890s, 1900, and around there? It was quite a large movement of people, and in fact, at the Tennessee Banjo Institute, which is happening in a little over a month down in east of Nashville, unfortunately, it's already sold out, so I don't want to plug it and make it sound like, oh, you can still get in, really? Great. Anyway, it's a congregation of a lot of over 200 banjo student-type people and at least 60 banjo professionals like ourselves here, and we're going to be there, and they do represent some people coming from England as well as around the United States who play this style. So why don't you give an example of that kind of playing, Tony? Or, well, you know, you're the guy who can answer this question, so why don't, how much to play a little bit? Oh, enough, you know.
Okay, this is a tune that dates from the turn of the century. I played a different one yesterday. This is called Kansas Jig. It's a 3-finger style. Open back banjos were used. Gut strings, of course.
No picks?
No picks.
This man wants to give away to somebody. Who wants it? No.
That's my trash can medal, right? I've got a question for Eddie. I'm a dumb banjo player trying to be.
Talk as loud as you can so I can hear it.
I noticed that Eddie does not use his feet much.
Hold on, wait a second. Hold on, wait. I can't hear you when that guy drives by with his nice machine.
I noticed that Eddie does not use his feet much and keep time with his playing. How do you accomplish that? What do you wiggle? Your tongue, your eyeballs, what?
Okay, most of you heard that, but Eddie's not tapping his foot. He's saying, what does Eddie tap when he plays? Where is Eddie? Eddie? Eddie, how do you do that? You just disappeared. Eddie? All right, well, I think we'll have to wait maybe until Eddie reappears before we can get him to answer that question.
This is my trash can model.
That's his trash can model, and
Reworked it.
all right, looks good. Looks like the one I started on. Here's somebody who hasn't asked one yet. There's a fellow. Go ahead.
Any tips on amplification versus use of pickups? Anything?
All right, that's a wide open area. Amplification versus use of pickups. Anybody want to tackle that one? Scott, have you? That's right. You guys have. You plug in, I hear. Tell about it.
Well, as far as amplification goes, you can use an amplifier like for a stage monitor, but really the pickup is just replacing the microphone. So it's not really electrifying the instrument. It's just you're just using a pickup, you know, and then going into like an effects unit or a direct box, and going straight to the board.
What type do you use of pickup?
I'm using a Gerald Jones. I find it works really well. Pretty happy.
And you do that for the sound the audience hears as well as what you hear on stage?
Right.
Let's see, and you say you use effects boxes. What do you mean by saying an effects box? I know, but
I'm using
tell everyone.
a Digitech GSP5. It's a multi-effects processor. It's got some digital reverbs and parametric EQ, distortion, a lot of weird stuff, delays. It's fun to play around with, just, you know, do different sounds.
What caused you, as you probably know, I assume you would know that you could start with a microphone instead of a pickup if you chose and still be able to go through effects and so on.
Sure.
But what was it that made you decide to use the Jones pickup instead of a microphone?
To be able to hear everything on stage, really, that's probably the main thing, is for us to be able to hear ourselves at a volume that makes us, where we can get into it more. You know, you can feel it. You've got more dynamics than just playing into a mic. Plus, you can move around on stage. You don't have to just stand in front of a microphone, which there's nothing wrong with any of that, but it's just something we're trying out.
One thing about microphones, of course, you can turn it up so that the audience can hear it real loud, but if you start turning a microphone up very loud on stage, you're really inviting feedback from the monitor speakers. But when you use a pickup, as their band does, then you can have it quite loud on stage without worrying about feedback.
Right, yeah. You can boost the volume a lot more.
All right. Well, we'll get a chance to hear how that goes tonight. Mic placement for banjos. Anybody have any points on that? Mike?
I've kind of heard this from other people too, but I think what works best for me is keeping the mic down in this area of the head. And I'm not exactly sure why it sounds better there, but it seems like you can get a little bit of a bassier sound, and maybe the only problem is the closer it is to your picks, you might get a little more pick noise. I know in the studio you might mic it quite differently, like maybe do it in stereo and have one mic aimed more towards the neck. But I guess for me the sweet place seems to be right in this area, right in here, below the bridge and close to the end of the tension.
One thing that I think is really useful whenever determining all kinds of different things about amplification and so on. One of the real problems, I started using a phase shifter on a banjo, which is it's a special effect on the banjo a long time ago, and I found the only way to really find out what it sounded like to the audience was to go through a whole series of steps which took into account the fact that I, as the player, am mostly going to be hearing the banjo itself. It's a very loud thing, and it's just a foot or two away from my ear. And if I'm sending it through a signal processing of some kind, then how do I know what that sounds like? Or, for instance, how would I evaluate the sound of a microphone or mic placement, or how an effect sounds on it? And you have to use a variety of systems. One is you can play it on stage, but then you might ask people what sounded better when I played with this or that mic placement, or this or that different microphone, or this or that pickup compared to a microphone. You can get other people's opinions, or you can tape it, put it on recording tape and listen to it. One thing I did when using some of these things, and I do it in the studio, is wear headphones that are insulated so that you can't hear anything except pretty much what's just coming through the headphones. And then you can try different things and see what pleases you without actually getting interference from the actual banjo itself, which would kind of distort your perception of it. And then in the studio, the thing to do when you're really trying to get a good idea of where to put the mic or which mic to use, I try to play an equivalent representative passage of something I do, maybe a little bit down the neck, a little bit up the neck, and I play the same thing time after time, and each time I say this is time number 1 with a microphone over here, and then I record all that, and I listen back, and when I hear what I consider the nicest banjo sound, I also hear myself identifying on the tape exactly what I did just then. And it's pretty hard, if you just experiment, it's pretty hard to really know how it's going to sound unless you take a special effort to have a way of hearing it back, you know, and just hearing it yourself as you're playing in open air is not necessarily the best way. How about another question? Oh, there you are. Okay, let's hear yours.
Everybody's real busy, and I was wondering if y'all could comment on maybe a 15, 20-minute practice exercise that banjo players can do on a daily basis. Just keep your chops up. In other words, it's not going to do any good simply following that break down. But maybe a few, some roll exercises, left or right hand exercises.
All right. The question is, in the limited amount of practice time a lot of us have, what can you do in just a 15 or 20-minute period to really keep your chops up? Your chops mean just make your banjo muscles work real good and do what you're trying to do on a technical level. Anybody have any short, the 15-second workout kind of thing? The micro banjo workout for tape?
15 seconds?
Well, 15 minutes, really.
It's interesting because I find myself, when I warm up or practice, sometimes I do tend to play tunes and maybe play them over and over again and just get going. Sometimes I'll just work on a technique that I'm trying to work on for a tune in the band, and I might play that over and over again many times until my fingers feel like they're falling off. Sometimes I do a little single string exercise just to get my left hand going, where I just play every note. Go across the strings. And then up. And it just kind of gets my fingers in touch with both hands, but I don't have any real definitive practice type of thing. So.
I have one thing that I do like to recommend for practicing. If you make a point of practicing a few really common moves that you think are just kind of really typical of what you're playing could sound like doing, I don't know how to put this into words, I guess, but something that if you can do it well, it'll make it's an important part of all your playing. And I might just take a particular role. In fact, he said, I wouldn't want to play Foggy Mountain Breakdown for 15 minutes. Well, if you really play it for 15 minutes, trying really hard to play it fast and loud and clear, you can get a lot of help from it. I might just go. And just do that until, if I weren't warmed up, I would have started a lot slower than that. And I just keep leaning into that one thing again and again for a minute or two at a time, and that is
Not
something
for
that will
15
really.
minutes.
Well, not for 15.
Okay.
Well, not for 15. I do the. That I do for 15 minutes. But anyway, that's a right-hand thing. Then I might do what Mike does for a left-hand thing, and then what I especially do is I think of things that I've been pieces that I've been performing or I intend to perform. And I kind of pinpoint some places in the song that are danger spots, things that I have found myself sometimes messing up on or just not really getting behind in the way I feel I should. And then I'll make exercises just out of that. Like there was this one lick that I used to play in the Hot Rides band in Radio Boogie, which involved a muscle on my left hand sort of pushing. I found out that a lot of the times I couldn't do things, it was the ring finger of my left hand that was kind of being controlled by sluggish, lazy muscles. And this particular lick, I'd have to use the ring finger to hold the string and then push it pretty hard for a defined pull-off. And then I'd have to quickly grab a different position and do the same thing. And this combination was sometimes rather awkward, and unless I practiced it, I'd mess it up a lot on stage. So I'd practice an exercise like this. And you hear me kind of being a little bit awkward with it. Well, that's the whole idea. If you pick out something you're a little bit awkward with, and you start on it and stay with it for a few minutes at a time, and just don't do anything but that one thing, keeping a rhythm going, playing along with a metronome or something like that, you'll really give that lazy muscle quite a workout, and it'll not only help you play that lick better, but any other lick that you're having trouble with because of the same lazy muscle. That muscle will stop being so lazy when you demand a lot of specifics from it like that.
I think another thing that it helps to play things very slowly as well as fast. There's always a temptation to play things really fast, and I do this myself, to do something like... And a lot of my students do that, and I've done that myself with things where you just want to blast through the tune, then you get to the hard part and kind of slow way down. But it's good to keep a consistent speed. But in addition, don't be afraid to play like very slowly, like at this speed. Something like that. I mean, really slow, because it's much hard. In some ways, it's a lot harder to play at that speed in good time than it is in a real fast speed, because the distance between the notes is much farther apart, and you can really see where your rhythmic weaknesses are. So John Hartford talks about doing this, and he got it from Buddy Emmons, who recommends playing things extremely slowly for a while with a metronome, say, and then speeding it up. And it's good to kind of go both ends. John Hartford again talks about this. Play something really slowly and then really fast, as long as you can do it relatively cleanly, to kind of stretch both muscles, you know, at both ends of the spectrum.
Okay, we have time for maybe another question or two.